It's Grace Redman. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Real Talk, where I get to have real life, raw conversations with incredible people from my circles and communities who have overcome challenges and created amazing. Today, my incredible guest is Matthew Cossolotto. From the corridors of Capitol Hill to the strategic chambers of NATO, Matthew has built a career at the intersection of leadership, communication, and personal empowerment. A former aide to Congressman Leon Panetta and a speechwriter for top leaders at NATO and the U.S. House of Representatives, Matthew's influence spans both sides of the Atlantic. But his story didn't stop at political power. A heartfelt promise set him on a new mission as a personal empowerment author, speaker, and coach. Today, Matthew inspires audiences through his signature trifecta of transformation: habits, speaking, and promises. A unique combination he calls his power tools for personal growth and leadership. He has coached and crafted speeches for Fortune 500 executives, university chancellors, and global thought leaders. Whether he's on stage, in the boardroom, or behind the pen, Matthew's goal is simple: to help people unlock their potential and speak their dreams into existence. Please help me welcome Matthew Cossolotto today. Hi, Matthew.
Hello, hello, Grace. It's a
How
joy
are
to
you?
be here.
Oh, thank you. It's a joy to be here with you too. And I have your book, The Joy of Public Speaking.
I'm happy to see the book in your hands.
Yes, yes. And I never would have thought to put the word joy with public speaking. So I love that because in my staffing firm, one of our questions is, where do you feel you need improvement? And I kid you not, almost 95% of the people that we meet with say public speaking.
Right. I love putting the words together. I always say that it's not an oxymoron. Joy and public speaking, people think they don't go together. But the fact is they do go together, and that's what the book's about. And I'd like to kind of shock people with the title because it
Yes,
opens up, just plants the seed of joy and public
yes.
speaking. So we can talk about all of that. But yes, it is, if you can look at the statistics, 75% studies say people are afraid, have some trepidation about public speaking. 75%. I actually have my doubts about the other 25%. Are they really being honest when they
Right,
do these surveys? So I
right.
think it's really more than 25, more than 75%.
Which is interesting. Why do you think the percentages of people who are afraid of public speaking are so high?
Well, it goes back, I think, to childhood. It goes back to sort of the collective unconscious to some
Mm.
extent. People always, if you ask anybody, do you like public speaking? They tend to say, no, I hate doing it. And so it becomes sort of everybody accepts it as the norm.
Oh,
And yet,
interesting.
yeah, and yet when you talk to people, in fact, people talk all the time to other people. We actually enjoy talking to other people. We talk to our friends, our colleagues, or even perfect strangers, and we don't get all uptight about it, right? So there is, when you're just speaking, you feel like, well, this is fine. I'm happy to do it, and people don't get upset or nervous about it. But when you put the label public on it, and it's on the title, it's in the title of the book, public speaking. But I encourage people not to put that label public speaking on it, and that's when it gets
Mm.
a little bit nerve wracking. So we can go through some of the ideas about how you make the shift. I like to help people make the shift from stage fright to stage delight.
I like that. From stage fright to stage delight. Well, I definitely had some major stage fright, and it took me 3 years to overcome it. And now, if you told me, 10 years ago that I would have a podcast and I would just be doing public speaking and be a professional speaker, I'd tell you, you're crazy, because I was terrified of public speaking.
Well,
Terrified.
there's what I call the inner game. It's what are your thoughts about speaking? What do you do you have a negative view of it? And then that sort of is a self-fulfilling prophecy if you
You're
have a
right.
lot of negative ideas rattling around in your brain. So, what creates the fear? It's what goes on between the ears.
That's so
And what
true.
creates the joy? The joy comes from between the ears too. So there is hope.
Yes, there is hope. There is hope. If I've done it, anyone can do it. And I love what you say. It's an inner game. Either way, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
And
Exactly.
why do you feel it's important for people to strengthen their public speaking skills?
I think there are really three reasons that I come up with, and there may be many more, but I think the main ones, these three. The first two won't surprise anybody. The first one has to do with career advancement.
Mm,
If you get better at public speaking, almost whatever job you have, at some point you maybe have to lead meetings, or you have to go out and talk to some organization for your job. If you get better at public speaking and you actually want to volunteer, if you volunteer to go out and speak, as you said in your survey with your staff, a lot of people have some trepidation and fear. So if you get better at it and you go out and do it voluntarily, your bosses, the organization will notice that you
yeah.
feel good about doing it. So it's a career advancement tool. I always say, banish the fear and boost your career. So
Ooh, I like that. I like
if you get rid of the fear, you can boost your career. That's the
that.
first one. The second one has to do with leadership. It's a leadership imperative to get out and speak. So it's leadership enhancement. So you get better at public speaking. You are in a better position to be a leader. It kind of overlaps with career advancement, but the fact is, if you can feel comfortable as a leader, leaders speak
Yeah,
and followers listen. Right. So there's no.
true.
I'm not knocking followers. Every
No.
leader needs a follower, but or need a bunch of followers. So leaders speak, followers listen. So it's a leadership imperative. So speak your way to the peak is the line I like to use.
Ooh.
Speak your way to the peak. The third reason is one of the main reasons I got interested in this and really feel passionate about it is that it's a personal empowerment
Mm,
tool or a skill for personal empowerment. People who get up and speak feel more empowered than people who sit and cower and feel afraid. And so I like to try to break down the stage fright to stage delight idea. I like to do that for people because I like to empower people. That's my mission. And that's what I do with promises, with habits, and with speaking. So it's a personal empowerment tool. There's a
mm.
great quote from John F. Kennedy, former president, of course,
Yeah.
back in the early 60s. He liked to give this definition. He would say the Greek definition of happiness. Someone asked him, do you enjoy being president? And he cited this. He said, the Greek definition of happiness is the full use of your powers along lines of excellence.
Mm.
The full use of your powers. That's such an important, it's stuck with me
Oh,
for many, many years. And that's what speaking is one of those things. If you make the full use of your powers, you're going to get up and speak
it's
because
true.
speaking is a human trait or human capability, uniquely human among all the animals. If you don't make full use of your powers, you're not as happy or as empowered as you might otherwise be. So that gets you to the joy of public speaking.
Mhm. And I love how you're saying when you have that confidence to speak, then you feel more empowered. And
Exactly.
I never looked at it that way. You're right. It's a personal empowerment. And also what's coming up is you're using your voice because in my experience, I've had a hard time, number one, using my voice, number two, being seen.
Wow, that's a powerful idea. Find your voice is in the subtitle of the book. It's the joy of public speaking. Find your voice and reach your peak potential. So that's
Mhm.
the title of the book, the full title. So
Yeah,
it is all about finding your voice and being seen. I think there are a lot of reasons that people might fear public speaking. People have done studies of this for a long time. People might feel that they're being judged, or they might make a mistake, or they have all
right.
these negative ideas. But I also think that people have a reluctance to simply be seen. It
Yes.
isn't what you're going to say; it's that you're in the spotlight. So there's a hesitation, there's a reluctance, there's again the inner game.
Yes.
You're playing it to lose if
Mm,
you think about if you get a little bit self-conscious. So one of the things I talk about is make the shift from self-consciousness to support consciousness. And
ooh, I
go
like
through
that.
the 7 steps to joy. That's one of them. You become more support conscious.
What does becoming more support conscious mean?
What it means simply is the audience supports you. That's a
Mm,
little mantra you can just tell yourself before you go on stage, before you start your speech. I think you can go through some exercises uh, between the ears and get yourself ready. It's like if you watch golfers, they always have these practice swings. Uh, Real good athletes, they have things
mm,
they tell themselves. I recommend that you tell yourself certain things before you get on stage to give a talk. And one of them is the audience supports me. And
mm,
it's just something to remind yourself, repeat to yourself. It's kind of like an affirmation. The audience supports me.
mm,
And it
mm.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then, I tell people this in my workshops, and some people raise their hand. Well, what if the audience doesn't? What if it's a hostile audience? Well, very rarely are you going to be facing a hostile audience, unless you're, in a courtroom setting where there's,
Yeah.
a hostile, the jury is hostile. There is, most of the audiences that we're ever going to face as speakers, the audience is going to want the speaker to do well. The audience wants you to have some joy, have fun, be you, all
Mm,
these things. You just tell yourself the audience supports the speaker. I could tell you an incident if we have time to
yeah.
go into a time when I was my college graduation from UC Berkeley. I was going to be a speaker at the ceremony. It was a big crowd, and I found myself with the jitters. I found myself with some stage fright. I I wasn't giving. I wasn't the speaker because of my grade point average or anything, which was pretty high, but I wasn't the valedictorian. But I was the president of the Undergraduate Political Science Student Association, and we were giving an award to the Professor of the Year. And I was tapped to do that. And I was looking out at the audience, thinking about all these people and who am I to be talking to all these people? There must have been 1,000, it's like this big auditorium. And I was, getting very jittery, nervous, and I was stuck in my own head and all kinds of negative thoughts. And I started out and I was, real nervous and, couldn't talk and I needed some water and all. And it was an amazing thing. About halfway through, I actually caught a glimpse of my mother and some friends, but mostly my mother. She was beaming with pride, and here I was, all racked with fear, and I received support
Mm,
from my mother, from a few friends, and that turned it around. I
mm,
started to look at the audience. People were smiling. They supported me,
oh,
and that was
I
the first time I really had that shift in my mind. The inner game kind of clicked there, and I realized there was support, and I felt a lot more at ease. And I think people going into it, don't put yourself through the first half that I did. Uh, start out with this idea of the audience support you, and that's a powerful thing. There are other things you can do, but that's one of the main ones that I use to get myself in the right frame of mind.
mm. So a lot of it is mindset.
Huge part of it is mindset. In fact, it's really between the ears. So I start the book and I start my programs with the inner game because that's where joy is. That's where the stage delight comes from, is the inner game. And you have to get that part right. You get the mindset correct, then the outer game becomes much more easy for you. There are certain things you can do, and I can go through some of those things. I do them in the book, but I always look at the inner game first. If you don't get that right, the outer game doesn't really help you too much. The performance. So I talk about a joy gap. There's a joy gap a lot of people feel, you have to close that gap. You want to close the joy gap because
Mm.
the joy gap causes a performance gap.
Ooh,
Your
okay. Let's talk
performance gap,
about that.
you know,
Let's talk
you,
about that. The
yeah,
joy gap
the joy gap is the
causes
gap
the
you,
performance gap.
yes,
Mm,
because as I felt at UC Berkeley, I know it's kind of in your neck of the woods, but
yes.
that's where I grew up in the Bay Area, and so you have the joy gap means you're uptight, you're thinking those internal thoughts about the audience is hostile in some way. They're not. They're not hostile. You're having these thoughts about things are going to go wrong. Well, every things might go wrong, but don't focus on that.
Yes.
Most of the time things go well.
Yes.
So focus on the positive. It's always so the joy gap is to the extent that you're thinking negative thoughts, the gap gets bigger and bigger. And if you think positive thoughts, you start to close the joy gap. Your performance gets better.
Mhm.
You breathe. You take your
Mm,
time. You have some fun. There is some stage delight to be had, but you have to have the right mindset. So the performance goes down. I always say that if you enjoy what you're doing, you're probably going to be better at it
yes.
than if you hate what you're doing. And that's true with tennis or playing a musical instrument or just about anything, doing mathematics or something. Anything that if you enjoy it, you're going to be better at it. So that's where the joy gap and the performance gap sort of
Mhm.
get closed together. You're better at it if you enjoy it.
I love that because we talk about also when we're in a place of joy, we're able to be more, productive, and then we attract better opportunities. So I've never heard it communicated the way you communicated it. Close, the joy gap. You increase your performance. That's huge.
It is because you become a little bit more at ease. You become a little bit more who you were meant to be, in front of an audience. You just become much more capable of delivering a really good presentation if you're enjoying it. If you find that recipe for the joy of public speaking, you're going to be better at it.
Yeah. And what I'm getting, it's not just you'll be better at public speaking when you close that joy gap and you're a place of joy and ease and you're feeling good and you've mastered the inner game, you're going to be better at whatever you do.
It's so empowering, and you're getting into an area where I talk about, but I think that the joy of public speaking does not stop at the podium's edge.
No.
The
And
joy
that's
of public speaking spills over into other aspects of your life. You feel like, hey, I can go be a leader in the community. I can
yes.
go run for public office. And one of the
Yes.
things I like to do is by encouraging people to get beyond the stage fright and feel empowered, I'd like to say, look at the state of the world right now. It's kind of a mess. Maybe
Yes.
some other people should get up and speak.
Yes.
maybe some
Yes.
people who maybe some people who've been a little reluctant and kept silent because they were nervous. Don't let the nervousness hold you back.
No.
So once you break through and you get this idea of the joy of public speaking, maybe you go out and you speak more and you share your ideas more and you feel more empowered. And you change the world for the
Yes.
better.
Yes, and we need that. We need people that can come from a place of joy and kindness and humanity. And you're right, and that's why I started this podcast. Number one, to connect during the pandemic, but two, to highlight, these incredible people in my community who are doing great things, but they didn't know how to get out there and share what they're doing. And we need you. If you're listening, we need you to
We
get
need
out
you. We
there.
need
Yes.
people who more voices,
Yes,
more
we need
choices.
more. Yes, more voices, more choices. So please, we need you because
Stop being in the shadows,
yes,
get out,
please,
yeah, and get out and
we need
speak.
you.
That's your power. And,
Yes.
I talk also about habits and promises. And one of the
That's
things
what
I
I was going
always
to
like
ask
to
you.
suggest is that people make a promise to themselves or to someone you care about. Make a promise that you're going to get better at public speaking, that you're going to tap into the joy of public speaking. You'll start by reading my book, or start by, just getting out there and speaking. But,
Yeah.
there are some other tips we can go through, but, that helps break down the fear. I sometimes during, at one point we talked about the terror alerts, years ago, the terror alert was red or orange or something. So I like to go step by step to lower the public speaking terror alert that people. So one step, two steps, three steps, that helps to, and the idea of the audience support you is one of those steps.
Yeah, I
So I don't know
love
if
that.
you want to touch a couple more. We can't probably go through all of them, but
Yeah, we can definitely do that. What I wanted to ask you was how, when you first started in your career and, being in front of, very high profile individuals and having to speak, and how did you overcome your fear?
well, there were times when I felt a little bit of this. I guess it's a feeling of, do I really belong here?
Mm,
It's just, am I, who am I? To get up
I
and
hear
speak.
you.
The people have that, and so I began to realize a couple of things. First of all, I've accomplished quite a bit in
Yes.
my life, and I go back to that and say, look, I've done some pretty impressive things. So that's something I can build on. Also, one thing that speakers can learn from, it's not one of the 7 steps, but keep this in mind: you are the master of your presentation. You are the world's expert on your presentation. Other people have no idea what you meant to say, what you thought you were going to say, what you planned to say. You can give them a little bit of an outline. Maybe that's a good idea, but you're the master of what you have to say. So I took there's a lot of strength in knowing
Yes.
that what I'm going to say is my talk, and no one else. There might be a lot of experts out there on this or that or some aspect of what I'm going to talk about, but nobody knows my talk like I do. So
I
that's
love.
right there. An expert on your presentation.
Yes. And you're unique. No one else is like you. And so again, this keeps going back to the inner game, keeps going back to our thoughts.
Your thoughts are very powerful,
Yeah,
and
very powerful.
if you can master the inner game with certain steps. One that I like to starts with the I've got 7 steps to joy. We may not get to all of them, but I think the first one is, and what I try to do, Grace, and you probably know this, you've read the book, but what I like to do is, I'm not here to just change people's minds. I'm here to blow your mind. I'm
Hmm.
here to blow your mind about public speaking. People have all kinds of ideas about it. Forget all of that. Wipe the slate clean and have some new ideas that can help change your attitude, change your mindset. So the first one, and people are going to probably say, well, what's he talking about? What I'm talking about is this. Here's what you should do: always speak to an audience of one.
Mm.
It's not a big audience. That was my mistake at UC Berkeley. I was thinking, no, look at this huge audience. Never think about how many. It's always one.
Mm.
And you might say, well, that's crazy. Yeah, this guy's nuts. There are 20, 40, 100 people, thousands of people. Never have that. That's playing the mind game to lose.
Ooh.
You want to play the mind game to win. You're always speaking to an audience of one. If you can get that in your mind, because you're speaking essentially to one person at a time. That's what you should be doing.
Now, do
And
you
it's
pick
always,
the person that like, do you pick the person ahead of time that you're speaking to?
no, different people, but it's always one at a time.
Got it.
So
Oh,
you
got
you talk to one person at a time for 5 seconds. You talk right to one person, but it's always one person, and you never think about how many.
it. Mm.
If you can get that, If you can get that between your ears and plant that, now there's a companion step that follows this, but it's huge. If you can get that, always speak to an audience of one, always, not just sometimes, always. So
Mm.
that's the beginning. That's how you start to play the mind game to win. It's always one person at a time. The
You
companion, go
I
ahead.
was gonna share, I apologize. I
Oh,
I went to watch a speaker that, I listen to all of the time, and I happened to be in the front row, and I could swear that he would look right at me. And now that
yeah.
you're saying that, that's I didn't realize, that that is a principle to speak to one. And what I realized that did was it created a connection.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm sure. So what you're saying is you're speaking to one, but as you're going through, the audits and speaking to one person, it's creating a connection, which I think becomes a collective connection.
Wow. That's exactly right. The audience actually is united in a way, sort of. So what you want to do is kind of an empathic connection with
Mhm.
through the eyes. I think of it as like when you plug in a electrical plug into an outlet, you, you plug in, your eyes get plugged into the eyes of the person you're talking to, and there's a connection. There's an electrical charge almost if you're attuned to it. And what's interesting, the most fascinating thing about this, everybody else in the audience sees that. They see that you're connected. The worst
Mm,
thing to do is to be disconnected and to be stuck in your notes, or to be stuck with your PowerPoints and always looking up at the PowerPoint, the screen. That's the worst thing. Always stay in connection. About 90% of the time or more, you should be in connection with one person. Keep your eyes on the road is the other way. You just
I like
stay. That's the road. The road is in connection with individuals in the audience, one at a time. Let me just go to the second one because these are like companions.
the companion.
So always speak to the audience of one, an audience of one. The second one is there's no such thing as public speaking.
Mm,
Don't think of it as public. We mentioned this earlier, but forget the word public. I know we always say public, and I put it on the title of the book, but I was toying with just say speaking, but people kind of understand it as public. But
yes.
in your mind, there's no such thing as public speaking. There's just speaking. And people do this very comfortably, even with joy, every day.
Yes.
There are some cases you can, argue the ridiculous or the extreme case. Some people get, are nervous with even individuals that have social anxiety or whatever. I'm not, but for the most part, most
Yes.
most people, 95%, whatever it is, uh, they speak very comfortably with
We all do.
your friends.
Yeah.
We all do it. And so you take that knowledge, you put that in your head, take
Mm,
that.
mm,
There's no such thing as public speaking. There's only speaking. And so what are you doing in front of an audience? I always like to say this. You're not performing brain surgery. I'm all nervous. I'm going to, someone's going to die up here. It's not brain surgery. You're not juggling chainsaws. You're speaking
what you
something
do
you do
every day, all day, most of the
every
time.
day, every hour of every day. We're speaking. So that's what you're doing. It's not public speaking, which causes the stage fright. In fact, by the way, little trivia: Mark Twain coined the term stage fright.
Oh, really?
He talked about Tom Sawyer getting up and from an audience. He did pretty well for the first half or so, and then he realized what was happening. He got all tongue tied, and he stopped speaking and walked out, in disgrace. But that was stage fright. And Mark Twain even also said that most speakers are nervous. Most speakers are nervous, and the others are liars.
Ooh, well, because you said earlier 75%
It's
of
not.
people have a fear, but you think it's higher because the other
I think
25%.
it's higher. It's not real debilitating stage fright. Some people have the real state, but there's a sense. I like to say, look, anybody can get to joy, even if you think you don't have stage fright, you don't get that nervous. There's some level here. Maybe you're not speaking really to one person at a time. Maybe you're kind of looking out over their heads, or maybe you're doing something else so that you don't feel as nervous as you might have otherwise felt. But there are ways to improve, even if you're inexperienced. So I like to say this book, my programs are for experienced speakers, novice speakers, and terrified speakers.
Oh, for
It's like
everyone across the board.
the whole shebang.
One thing you talk about in your book, which I found was interesting, and I was like, whoa, this goes in the speaking book, is habits.
Habits.
Let's talk
It's
about
habits of thought, right? I mean, it's how do you, so I always talk, and some people might wonder, why do you talk about what I call the 6 axioms of personal empowerment and habits? I talk about that in the book. I talk about it in my programs, because that's the technology of personal change. You can't you can't play the mind game to win if you're stuck in your old habits. So I have one thing I talk about is the rubber band technique. I have this rubber band. You give yourself a
I see
snap
that.
for every negative thought about
Mm,
speaking. There are other ways to go about this, but in addition to this, but if you have a negative thought, even if you say this, here's an interesting thing. If words matter. If you say, and people say it all the time, I have to go give a speech in a negative way, oh, I've got to go give that speech. And maybe you're not that happy about it. That's where, I've worked with CEOs and politicians, and they're under the gun. But if they say things like, I have to go give that speech, stop that,
yeah,
time out, give
that is,
yourself a little snap. That's a negative approach.
yeah.
It's a real privilege. You get to go give a talk and present some empowering or important information to people, and you get that opportunity. Like being on your show here. This is a privilege to me. I get to go talk to Grace about this topic, and it's a wonderful thing. So don't never say anything negative about getting to give a talk and communicate your ideas.
I love it this because again, what's wrapped up in this, like when we first started, is personal empowerment, using our voice, stepping out and being seen. So that's, and now I'm understanding, a lot of the principles you use in the book, because really, yes, it is about the joy of public speaking, but it's also about empowering ourselves.
Empowerment is really what I'm all about, and I have these
Yes.
3 different skills or tools that I call it the triad of empowerment system, where you have habits, success habits, and I could tell you about the promise I made to my mother that
Yes.
got me
Please
on
share
this
that.
path. Should I do that? It's
Yes. We'd love to hear about the
I mean,
promise you
why
made.
am I even doing this? How did I get started in this? I was a speaker. I was, speechwriter, CEO level speechwriter, and I had written a couple books on European politics. And but I had this idea for a book, and it was, eh, and I wasn't committed to this, but I had this idea, and I shared it with my mother and some friends. And what do you think of this idea? Basically, and I'll tell you the idea was basically I read a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but I was having trouble remembering the habits, and when I do my programs, I often ask, who can remember the 7 habits? And sadly, not too many people can remember even one of the habits. But so I thought, well, maybe we need a mnemonic sort of device. Maybe there's some better way to talk about this. So I thought about the habit. What would I call them? Like the opposite habits, 7. What if it's habits of highly ineffective people, or what would I call that? And I ended up getting to failure habits. And it dawned on me like an epiphany that failure has 7 letters. The word failure has 7 letters. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe I could come up with a way to remember the 7 failure traps or the 7 failure habits. And it was like a double or multiple epiphany. I had this other epiphany that the word success, the opposite, has 7 letters. So it just
Interesting.
kind of clicked. 7 failure habits, 7 success habits. So I talked to my mother about what if I created like two acronyms side by side acronyms. She thought that's a great idea. She was with Toastmasters and she thought that was brilliant, you know. But I didn't think of myself as a personal empowerment or self-help writer at the time. So I wasn't really into it, but I thought that's kind of cool. And I would tell people, what if there's seven, and you could remember each one of them, you know, seven, you know, it's like the first one starts with an F, the second one, you know, it's
Oh, I
like
like that.
you could remember those things. So that's what I ended up doing. And the reason I did it was, and I don't know why I did this, but my mother got sick with cancer, and I knew it was the last time I was going to see her at home in California. And I said, I'm going to make a promise.
Mm.
Where that came from, I don't know. And I went into the darkened room and the Smith River. I could hear the Smith River in the distance. She was right next to it. And I said, Mom, I'm going to make a promise to you.
Mm.
I'm going to finish writing the book that you've been encouraging me to write. I'm going to somehow figure it out, and I'm going to dedicate it to your memory.
Mm.
And
Beautiful.
tears welled up, and and she wagged her finger at me, looking up. You do that, Matthew. You do that. This makes me very happy, she said. And I brought joy to my mother in this very terrible moment,
Mm.
but I knew I had to follow through. When I tell audiences that story, I usually get choked up.
Yeah.
I knew I had to do it. Failure was not an option. And it took a while to figure it out. And I finally came up with what could F stand for and what would the equal but opposite success habit be. And I'll just mention them.
Yes.
Those two, people get the idea. The first habit of failure, not in order of importance, but I think it is it is like the first one. It's finger pointing. Starts with
Mm.
F, finger pointing. And you have to recognize that, and you have to reject it. You have to recognize that you do it.
Mm.
It's the blame game. It's,
Yep.
making
Yes.
excuses, right?
Blaming
That's
someone else.
so what is the equal and opposite habit of success? Has to start with the letter S. So I called it shoulder responsibility.
Ooh, yes.
If you're busy finger pointing, you're gonna fail. If you shoulder responsibility for your life, you're gonna be that's a success habit. And all of the success habits, the 7 habits of success, they each have equal but opposite failure habits. If you want to get out of those failure habits, I remember going to a workshop on doing workshops, and I had not figured it all out yet, but I said the first 5 or 4 of them, I rattled them off. Here are the failure habits I'm working on this book. Finger pointing, and I won't go through the rest because it'll spoil it. Spoiler alert, right? Um, but each one I did like 4 of them, and there's one woman in the group. It was a small group, and she said, "You just solved 4 of my problems."
Oh my
Just
goodness. I love
becoming
that.
aware. You
Yes.
become
Oh,
aware of it, you can start to solve it.
yeah.
But one of the axioms of personal empowerment is you can't change what you don't realize.
Totally, totally. The awareness. I was connecting with a colleague yesterday and she felt like she needed to process something. And I said, look, just you being aware is going to help you process it. That's all you need to do right now. You're aware of it. That's it.
Awareness is one of the first steps, if not the
Yes.
first steps. Yoda in Star Wars, I like to quote Yoda, famous philosopher, who said, I'll do the voice, named must your fear be before banish it you can.
Oh, I
You
love,
have to
yeah,
name the fear. You have to
yes,
name the habit. You have to name it
the
before you can
awareness.
banish it.
Yes.
If
So
you
let's start
don't
naming those and banishing them. Banish.
banish.
Yeah.
You can't change what you don't realize. That's one of the
Yes.
axioms of personal
Yeah.
empowerment. So I got into this idea of these habits, made the promise, knew that I had to follow through. Took a while. It wasn't easy, but were it not for the promise, I don't think I would have done the book.
Wow.
I wrote a book called Habit Force, and I'm in the process of updating it. and making it better, I think. But, the first effort was, I think, good, and it succeeded with those memorable acronyms. You could go through, and I remember them. It's easy to remember. It starts with F, starts with A, starts with
Yeah.
I. And so that's really important. If people go through those 7 success habits, they're mutually reinforcing. If you shoulder responsibility, you also do 2 or 3 of the other success habits. They're just part of the package.
Can you share
They're
one more
mutually,
with us? Can you share one
yeah, I
more of
guess,
the habits?
yeah, I think another success habit, one of the S's at the end, the second to the end, success, is really important. Is, I call it, set your course. So the failure habit um, is basically reactive mindset, sort of bouncing around a little bit. You haven't set your course. You haven't set goals. You don't know where you're headed. So the failure habit is, kind of not doing that. A reactive mindset. A lot of people go through life just sort of bouncing
Yeah.
from one thing to the next and not knowing where they're headed. And so that's where the promise comes in the idea of success, setting your course, setting goals. And people have goals. That's great. People have New Year's resolutions. I don't encourage it. I say turn a resolution into a promise.
Oh, I love
I
that.
say turn an important goal into a heartfelt promise. You're much more likely to follow through.
Mm,
So I think that a promise, one of my lines is, a promise is like a goal on steroids. It's
that's
a more
beautiful.
powerful goal if it's a promise. And why is that? Why do you think it is? Grace, I'll put you on the spot. Why is a
Well,
promise?
when you said a promise is a goal on steroids, what I thought of when I make a promise to someone, it's someone that I love and it's very
Uh,
intentional and I don't want to let them down. Like, because if I make a promise, I'm not going to break it.
right. So that's the love part is there. A
Yes.
promise comes from the heart. The
Yes.
promise I made for my mother, it wasn't like I set a goal, Mom, I'm going to set a goal with you on your deathbed. It's like, what? That doesn't make sense. I'm not going to set a goal. I'm going to make a promise to you.
Yes.
I'll dedicate this book to your memory. That's from the heart.
Yeah. That's the heart.
Promises come from the heart. Goals are more cerebral. And
Yes.
and that's good, but if you can link it to
Mm,
passion, to your emotion,
yeah.
to your heart, man, you're much more likely to do it. So that's why I
Yes.
say make a promise to get better at public speaking. You're much more
It feels
likely to do it.
and it feels different when you say promise. When it comes from the heart, there's a different energy to it. So this has been so helpful, and I've taken some incredible nuggets of wisdom from you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate you. And for those who are listening or watching, where can they find you? Where can they find the joy of public speaking, and how can they connect with you?
Well, there are lots of options here, but I think they see the spelling of my name,
Yes.
so I don't need to go through that, which is an ordeal I've gone through in my life. So go to matthewcossolotto.com. That's my website. And it outlines, most of what I've talked about, at least some of it. So my different programs, the promises, the promise to my mother, a little bit of that, the joy of public speaking, habits. So you learn a little bit more about that, more detail. So the website is good. LinkedIn, again, find me by that name and, connect with me on LinkedIn. I think you can also go to just send me an email, matthew.cossolotto@gmail.com, matthew.cossolotto@gmail.com. You can get The Joy of Public Speaking on Amazon. It's an award-winning book.
Yes, I have it right here, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. And as a fresh, new professional speaker just from the last year, I took so much out of it. Thank you so much. And it does, like you said, it comes from the heart. So, and we will share all of your information with our audience. So
Terrific.
it's there. But if you have questions, as always, feel free to reach out to myself or Matthew. Matthew, thank you so much for joining me today. And for those of you watching, listening, and speaking, thank you so much. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you amazing guests like Matthew.